Hi, everybody. Matthew Turnage here. If you're like me, you're a fan of the Two Legs podcast. It's always a great episode every week with great interviews and great discussion. Well, they recently hit the 1,000 subscriber mark, so congratulations, Tom and Andy. It's well deserved, and hope you have continued success with the podcast. So they're running a contest to celebrate hitting 1,000 subscribers, asking people to give their their most favorite Paul McCartney albums from the 70s, 80s, 90s, the noughts, and the 2010s. And so here are my picks, and I guess I have pretty conventional tastes, as you'll see, but these are my favorites from each of the decades. From the 70s, Band on the Run. Now, Paul did a ton of great albums in the 70s. Ram is a very close second for me, but I love every album he did in that decade. Venus and Mars is another particular favorite. London Town is an album that here lately has been growing on me a lot. I love, but Band on the Run is the one I'll always return to. Is my favorite. I think every single song on here is great. Paul was at the peak of his powers, and just the opening salvo of Band on the Run and Jet. Such a great way to start an album. Let Me Roll It is a favorite of mine. Mrs. Vanderbilt, 1985. Ton of great songs on here. So heavy competition for the 70s, but Band on the Run takes my favorite for that decade. The 80s, I'm going with Tug of War. It's another great album from Paul, where you could tell he really was focused and putting in a strong effort. The title track is a favorite of mine. Take It Away, I love. Here Today, Wanderlust. So many great songs on this one, and I even like Ebony and Ivory. Maybe it's a little too unsubtle, but it's a really good, I think it's a good song. And Tug of War is my favorite of the 80s. The 90s, not a lot to choose from in the 90s, but still, Flaming Pie is an absolute brilliant album, one of Paul's very best. I love every track on this album. The songs we were singing is such a great way to start off. Calico Skies is one of my favorite songs that Paul ever did. I could go on and on about this one. In fact, I've reviewed this album on my channel. I absolutely love Flaming Pie. So that's my favorite of the 90s. In the noughties, Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. This to me is the album where from this point on, Paul has not done a weak album. Every studio album from this point on I think is great. This album in particular is one of his very best. Jenny Wren is one of my favorite songs Paul ever did. And a lot of other good songs on here. Fine Line, How Kind of You, Riding to Vanity Fair is another favorite. Every track on here is good. Chaos and Creation in the Backyard from the noughts, and then the 2010s, also another decade where we don't have a ton of Paul albums to choose from, but I'm taking Egypt Station. I think this is a really strong effort from Paul. I think this has really held up very well for me. I Don't Know, I think, is a great song. Who Cares is one of my favorites, Paul's, from the last 20 years or so. I think that's a brilliant song. People Want Peace. I love the lyrics to that one. I was just talking to a friend of mine about that just the other day. Dominoes is another great Paul song. Back in Brazil, Caesar Rock. Lots of great stuff. So that's my contest entry. Those are the albums that I've picked from each of those decades. Nothing too shocking or out of the box there, but those are the ones that I love. Again, congratulations, Tom and Andy. Well deserved. And if there's anybody out there who is not a subscriber to Two Legs Podcast, please check out their channel and subscribe. You won't regret it. Thanks.